Howdy everyone! For today's Jolly Lark, we're painting up this terrific little Skag from the recent Monster Fight Club Borderlands Kickstarter. I've done one kind of basic brown Skag previously, and I wanted to paint up one in kind of more of a poison Skag, spitter Skag, bright green color scheme. With all of these Jolly Lark painting videos, what I'm hoping to do is both show you how to paint one specific model, but also introduce a lot of different ideas in paintings. You can see what strikes your fancy, you can take a little column A, a little column B, and learn some new techniques that'll help you to paint any model. So with each of these videos, I'm going to try to do something a little different than what I've done before. Try a different color, try a different technique, show you something a little different. So if you've been watching all of these videos, thank you so much, I really appreciate it. And we're going to keep going with it. There's lots more to cover. So on this one, we're starting out with a basic contrast coat of the Citadel Warp Lightning contrast paint. This is a big fat brush all over sort of step. We're just going to get the entire miniature coated with a reasonably thick layer of the Warp Lightning contrast paint. This will be a good base coat for everything left to come. We're going for bright green scales with a little bit darker earth tone skin is the ultimate goal, as you saw at the beginning. So we're going to use a crackle paint like we did with the previous Scrag, but this time I'm going to show you a trick where if you paint the base a darker color than the texture paint that you're using, what you'll actually get with the texture paint as it dries and cracks, you'll be able to see this darker color through the cracks in the upper lighter layer. So it's a neat trick. You can do it for other special effects. We'll show you in a lava-based video later on. It really doesn't matter at this point how even it is. We're just kind of looking for a base coat. I've got some of the contrast paint still wet on the feet that's mixing in, and that's fine. So with the base still wet, I'm doing this reasonably quickly. This whole miniature start to finish is about 20 minutes. What we're going to do is take some Agrax Earthshade and put it on top of the contrast paint, but just on the muscly kind of skin portion of the Skag. We're going to leave those scales that are on top of the miniature that nice bright green. Like I said, this whole miniature was about 20 minutes start to finish. With most of these videos, we may branch into some longer format, kind of more intensive painting, but mostly this is about aiming for the game at the end of the painting tunnel. I love painting, but it's always with a game in mind. So with that philosophy, I want to make sure that I'm spending as much time as is fun on a miniature. For a fun little small miniature like this, I think 20-30 minutes per mini seems reasonable to me. You could do it faster, you could do it slower. Right now you've got a brown base and a green Skag, and maybe that's enough for you on the tabletop, and that's what's fun for you to paint, and that's cool. So in this step, what I'm doing here is grabbing a little bit of pure white paint. Whatever white paint you prefer is fine. I really like the Pro-Acryl Bold Titanium White. It's nice and bright. You can see it covers really well. And what I'm doing is kind of I'm not dry brushing. I'm just kind of hitting the edges of the scales with a little bit of bright white. And what that's going to do is combine with the fluorescent effect paint at the next step for a really cool bright green scale effect. While I've got some white in my brush, we'll go ahead and hit the teeth and the claws with a little bit of a white base coat. It's always something to think about when you're painting is while you've got a color on your brush, what else can you do with it? So I've got white on my brush. Let's see where else on the miniature needs some white. These Skags by Monster Fight Club were part of their new Kickstarter that wrapped up soon. I don't think the Pledge Manager has launched quite yet, but keep an eye out for that. But these miniatures have just been super fun to paint. I've been really happy to have a little collection of Borderlands characters on my desk in front of me as I've been working on these videos. And if you're staying tuned to the Kickstarter and staying tuned to the Jolly Lark channel, we'll have lots more Borderlands videos coming up in the upcoming months, alongside lots of other product reviews and other painting videos. So you can see as I'm wrapping up the white here, it's just kind of hitting the edges. I want to leave green in the cracks. You could dry brush this, but I wanted, for the Borderlands style, I wanted to have a sharper, kind of more defined highlights. All right, for the next step, I've grabbed a bottle of the Scale 75 FX Fluor Special Effects paints. What these are a set of very, very bright paints that you can use to get some neon effects. But they're very, very transparent. When you put them on, it's almost like putting Windex on a piece of glass or something. Like there's hardly any color there. If I was to paint this on top of the darker green skin, I think you would hardly notice an effect. I mean, look at how thin they are on my thumbnail there. But when you paint them over a white undercoat, you really get some of that fluorescent glow effect. You get that brightness of the fluorescent paint when it goes on top of white. So if you were doing any sort of fluorescent effects, like you wanted a power sword glowing or a neon sign or something like that, I would paint the area that you want to be glowing white first, paint the glow in white, and then layer the fluorescent paint on top of that. Here we're using the same qualities of the fluorescent paint to make the scales look nice and bright. And to give the fluorescent paint just a moment to dry before we put on another coat, I grabbed a little bit of that Agrax Earthshade Wash that we used earlier on the skin, put a little bit of that on the teeth, and then that's enough time. The paint dries pretty quick. That's enough time, just a few seconds, to let the fluorescent dry, and then we'll put another thin coat of the fluorescent on to brighten up the scales a little further, just make sure we haven't missed any spots. And you can see we're getting that nice glow effect on the scales. So we're getting close to finishing off the model here. We're going to grab a little bit of a watered down Pro-Acryl Magenta. You can see on my thumb there, it's thinned down a bit, because what I want to do is run a little bit of this into the cracks and crevices of the Skags mouth. With a high kind of density paints like Pro-Acryl, you can water them down a good bit and still get decent coverage. So you'll have some kind of gummy pink areas in the cracks and crevices, but you're not painting the entire mouth area solid bold pink. Yeah, it looks good, something like that. All right, and then finally, to make those bright corrosive scales look even brighter, the brighter the highlights, the brighter the eye reads the entire thing. So we're gonna go back in with a little bit of pure white. We're just hitting the very, very edges of the scales. We're hitting less smaller areas than we did initially with the white. And these are just to kind of give them a little bit of pop. These are, this is a from a distance gaming figure, not entering this in any painting competitions. So what we're going for is striking on the table effects. We want this to be a miniature that looks sharp on the table, that you can see when you're standing over the table from 3 feet away. And adding that white layer just gooses the contrast of the entire miniature and makes the whole thing visually look a lot more striking. So a lot of the detail on these Skags is in the textures of the scales and the skin, but there are a couple other areas that we want to hit before we call the miniature done. So we're going to come in and hit the claws of this Skag with the Pro-Acryl Golden Brown, which is just a nice kind of basic tan color. These claws got a little bit of white and got hit with some Agrax Earthshade earlier. That might be enough. You could see how they looked in the previous step. If you're happy with that, cool. But I decided I wanted to go with something that was a little bolder, a little more cartoony. And it's no big deal to redo a step if you decide you want something different halfway through. Gonna mix up the golden brown with a little bit of white that was left over on my palette from the previous step. Again, use what's on hand. It'll speed up your painting. It'll save you a little bit of paint. If you always think about what you can do with the paint you've poured out on your miniature. Is there anywhere else that needs a little bit of white? Is there anywhere else that needs a little pink before you move on to a next step? You'll notice I skipped the teeth with the golden brown because I want the teeth to be a little bit lighter and brighter than the claws. So I'm going in with the lighter tan that I made by mixing the golden brown with the white, and I'm going to base coat the teeth in that. Whenever you're working on long, pointy elements of a miniature like claws, horns, tusks, on a smaller scale, fangs and teeth, it's helpful to draw the brush from the base of the claw, of the pointy bit, down to the point. The brush will kind of naturally come to a point, and relatively quickly, as you can see here, you can build up 3 or 4 layers of color and give the claws or teeth a little more natural gradation from a darker brown up to a brighter white. So for the next step, continuing the theme of using the paint that's still on your palette, I'm going to go off screen here and grab a big fat dry brush and grab some of the same golden brown white mixture that I was using to tip off the claws and the teeth, and just give the crackle paint that's now fully dried on the base, give it just a real light touch swipe with that brown-white mixture. Mix to taste is one of the nice things about having a couple of different colors on your palette, is that you can mix and match. You don't always have to use an exact recipe. It's natural world is natural. If you're painting uniformed Marines, use the uniform color, but if you're painting beasties and monsters and people, I think it's nice to have a little bit of some of the natural variation that comes from mixing colors on your palette. If all of your bases are roughly the same shade of desert, but there's slight variations between them, I think that actually gives a nice look on the tabletop. So you can see on the base here, you can see some of the dark brown showing through the cracks that have formed as the texture paint dried with this light dry brush of white. We'll then just go around the edge of the base with a quick coat of Citadel Steel Legion Drab. Just gonna go easy. You don't want to have a too rough an edge on the base, but just run your brush around the edge. Usually let that dry for a minute, and I'll do a second coat after that's fully dry. You just want that edge of the base to be nice and even like so. As a final detailed step, which you can totally skip if you want, I'm going to put a little red dot on both eyes, which are a little small and hard to see, and I smudged it. But that's okay. Mistakes happen when you're painting. We're going to fix that up in a minute. We'll go ahead and go do the other eye. Just a tiny little red dot. It's hard to even see on camera there. Totally skippable step if you don't feel comfortable with that level of detail, or you're just trying to go for a rush. So there's a few different ways you can fix a mistake on a miniature. If the paint is still wet, just with a little bit of a damp brush, you can often just wipe it off. But it was such a little small amount of paint, that eye mistake that I made had already dried. So instead, what I'm going to do is just dab a little bit of black behind the eye where I smudged the red, dip my brush in some water, and then spread out that little dab of black. Depending on where it is on the miniature, a little bit of black paint can go a long way to work well as an eraser. Just a little tiny dot of black and feather that out, and that looks fine. So here we've got some of the brown grass tufts. These are from Tajima 1 and are a great opportunity to cover up some areas on the base if there's any areas of the base that you're not as happy with as you might like. We've got one area here that a little bit more green is showing through the cracks on the base than I would like. So just cover that up with the grass tufts. They are great for that. And that's it. Another fun miniature by Monster Fight Club from their Borderlands Kickstarter. Thank you so much to everyone who's joined the channel. We'll keep these videos coming along with lots of other painting videos. It really helps new channels like mine. If you like the videos, comment below if you have any questions. And of course, subscribe to the channel. And we'll see you soon for our next Jolly Lark. Bye-bye.